By the summer of 1964, the conflict in Vietnam was a simmering fuse, threatening to ignite the Cold War. President Lyndon B. Johnson inherited a commitment to preventing communist expansion in Asia, but direct military intervention lacked popular support. What Washington needed was a clear, undeniable provocation. This opportunity would allegedly arise in the disputed waters of the Gulf of Tonkin.
The USS Maddox, a destroyer, was conducting a routine electronic intelligence gathering mission known as the De Soto Patrol.
Their proximity to North Vietnamese territorial waters, within the 12-mile limit claimed by Hanoi, was deliberately provocative. On August 2, 1964, North Vietnam deemed the Maddox a hostile threat, authorizing a response. This marked the first encounter. The torpedo boats launched their attacks, aiming for the much larger destroyer.
The Maddox responded with heavy fire, assisted by U.S. fighter jets scrambled from the nearby USS Ticonderoga.
The swift retaliation proved devastating for the North Vietnamese boats, resulting in casualties and retreat. The initial skirmish was concluded. The U.S. had suffered no damage, but the implications of this exchange were only just beginning to unfold in Washington. When news of the attack reached the White House, President Johnson faced a choice: de-escalation or strong retaliation. Instead of withdrawing, the U.S. doubled down. The Maddox returned to the patrol area, now accompanied by the USS Turner Joy.
Defense Secretary Robert McNamara insisted the patrols continue, a symbolic message of American resolve.
The night of August 4th brought chaos. Visibility was poor. Weather conditions were terrible. The stage was around 8 p.m. local time. Radar operators aboard both destroyers began reporting multiple contacts closing in at high speeds.
They believed they were under a coordinated attack by North Vietnamese forces.
For hours, the destroyers fired into the darkness, attempting to defend against phantom attackers detected only on radar and sonar.
But the contacts were ambiguous. High humidity, terrible weather, and inexperienced operators led to what were likely.
Captain Herrick of the Maddox, despite the initial panic, quickly became doubtful. He transmitted messages urging caution, suggesting doubtful nature of the attack. But in Washington, the momentum for retaliation was overwhelming. The early reports of an unprovoked attack fit a convenient political narrative.
Despite the ambiguity, Johnson and his advisors concluded that decisive action was needed to maintain American credibility.
The president authorized immediate retaliatory airstrikes against North Vietnamese naval bases and oil storage facilities. Operation Pierce Arrow commenced on August 5th, the first official U.S. airstrike against North Vietnam.
The objective was clear: communicate resolve and punish the perceived aggression, cementing the official narrative of an unprovoked attack.
Repeated acts of violence against the armed forces of the United States must be met with positive reply.
Following the strikes, Johnson demanded a blank check from Congress, the Joint Resolution for the Maintenance of Peace and Security in Southeast Asia.
The resolution, drafted weeks earlier, was designed to give the president power to take all necessary measures to repel attack.
Few in Congress questioned the administration's version of the events of August 4th, largely due to the pervasive fear of appearing soft on communism.
The Gulf Tonkin Resolution passed almost unanimously. It was, effectively, a declaration of war without Congress ever formally declaring one. Johnson later remarked that the resolution was like grandma's nightgown. It covered everything. He now had the legal cover he needed.
With the resolution passed, the true scale of U.S. military involvement began. The Gulf of Tonkin Incident. The war that followed would cost millions of lives and fundamentally reshape the geopolitical landscape.
Decades later, revelations would confirm the profound doubt surrounding the events of August 4th.
Intelligence agencies deliberately skewed the facts, prioritizing initial, alarmist reports over later, more nuanced confirmations of error.
Captain Herrick's own doubts were sidelined. The political necessity of a clear incident trumped the complex reality at sea.
The foundation of massive U.S. military escalation was laid. The war in Vietnam shifted from advisory to
provided the legal loophole to expand the war without public debate, turning a regional conflict into America's defining foreign disaster.
The Gulf of Tonkin Incident, a historical lesson in how political necessity, ambiguous intelligence, and the desire.
The cost of this deception would only be fully accounted for years later.
But in that crucial first week of August, the distinction between fact and fiction vanished. Hanoi maintained that on August 4th, no attack took place. They had suffered losses on the 2nd and were in a defensive posture.
Post-incident review on the Maddox revealed that during the attack, sonar systems reported no contacts and no torpedo wakes were physically observed. McNamara, however, presented an ironclad case to Congress, proof of deliberate and repeated North Vietnamese aggression. This resolution was the legal catalyst that transformed a cold, calculated skirmish into an escalating hot war. The consequences of the fabricated second attack would soon be felt across the world.
The gap between what was reported and what actually happened was vast, but strategically ignored by those eager for war. Top military leaders quickly suppressed or downplayed the conflicting intelligence. Confirmation, not verification, was the mandate. The incident legitimized the deployment of ground troops and the escalation of air campaigns, like Operation Rolling Thunder. The Gulf of Tonkin Resolution funded a war that neither Congress nor the public fully understood the necessity of, or the true costs thereof. Politically, the resolution secured Johnson's image as a strong leader during his 1964 election campaign, capitalizing on patriotic fervor. The incident served as the pivotal turning point, transforming a political debate into a military commitment from which there was no easy retreat. The ship itself, central to the pretext, would soon be overshadowed by the massive war it helped unleash. Today, the Gulf of Tonkin incident remains a primary example of how governmental credibility can be leveraged to justify conflict. For the soldiers on the ground, the political maneuvers back home were irrelevant. They were simply caught in the escalating horror.
Years later, McNamara himself would admit that the August 4th attack was an error, a tragic mistake of interpretation.
Yet, by the time the truth emerged, the war machine had already devoured hundreds of thousands of lives. Titus. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was not the cause of the Vietnam War, but it was the essential, fabricated key that unlocked a legacy of misdirection, forever linking the names of two destroyers to the precipice of tragedy.
We return to the context of the DeSoto patrols. These electronic spying missions were intrinsically provocative.
The Maddox was designed to intercept North Vietnamese communications, radar, and coastal defenses, crucial intelligence for US-backed South Vietnamese raids. North Vietnam viewed the Maddox not as a simple passing ship, but as a direct accomplice to covert operations targeting their territory. Crucially, the Maddox was operating immediately after South Vietnamese frogmen, supported by the US, attacked key North Vietnamese islands. The US command knew these activities provoked a response. The Maddox patrol was intended to test North Vietnam's reaction threshold.
The resulting attack on August 2nd was aggressive, but perhaps not unprovoked in the context of the covert war already underway.
Although the torpedoes missed, the intent was hostile. The United States had its first concrete reason for retaliation.
Johnson immediately ordered the Maddox to continue its patrol, now reinforced by the Turner Joy. The patrols resumed, placing them directly back into the volatile zone, inviting further confrontation.
The events of August 4th were dominated by poor judgment and flawed technical data. Operators believed they saw enemy vessels closing in.
Yet, despite hours of intense naval fire, neither ship suffered damage, nor could the crews visually confirm any enemy targets.
Initial messages confirmed the attack. Subsequent, more sober analysis immediately contradicted them. We believe North Vietnam has committed a second unprovoked act against our forces.
The decision to launch Operation Pierce Arrow was made based on the first reports, before the doubt could reach the highest levels of command.
The swift retaliation and the subsequent resolution were presented to Congress as necessary measures to safeguard American liberty. The resolution passed on August 7th. less than 72 hours after the alleged second incident.
The full implementation of the resolution began immediately, transitioning U.S. policy from containment to direct combat. From tens of thousands to 500,000 men, the increase was exponential, driven by the open-ended mandate of the resolution. The Gulf of Tonkin provided the convenient justification for America's involvement in a war that would fundamentally challenge its identity and political structure. This fragile chain of events, rooted in dubious facts, became the unbreakable link binding America to Vietnam.
In the immediate aftermath, American public opinion overwhelmingly supported the president's actions, believing the narrative of defensive necessity.
The idea that America had been viciously attacked rallied the nation behind the expansion of military force.
Official statements repeatedly reinforced the narrative, omitting any mention of the doubt or the U.S. involvement in prior provocations.
The reality of August 4th was shrouded in the fog of war and technical malfunction, but politically, it was crystal clear.
The immediate priority in Washington, not accuracy.
The speed with which the resolution was pushed through Congress was testament to the administration's readiness and determination to escalate.
With the resolution secured, Johnson began increasing troop strength as requested by military commander General Westmoreland.
The resolution paved the way for sustained aerial bombardment campaigns, signaling a full commitment to the war. The political justification was over. The combat had begun, and the lives of young American men were placed in immediate peril. The Gulf of Tonkin Resolution would ultimately be cited to justify years of fighting, resulting in over 58,000 American deaths. Only 2 senators voted against the resolution. Years later, many would express deep regret for trusting the administration's portrayal of the events. The simple truth was that on August 4th, there was no attack. There was only confusion, fear.
That desire for justification proved to be one of the most consequential decisions of the 20th century.
It was not an incident that started the war, but the pretext that permitted it.
The patrols of the Maddox and Turner Joy were part of a larger plan to assert U.S. naval dominance near the North Vietnamese coast.
North Vietnamese forces were determined to confront the American presence, which they saw as violating their sovereign waters.
The first attack was real, a clear military engagement that resulted in the sinking of one North Vietnamese torpedo boat.
This first event justified retaliation, but Washington sought something grander, an undeniable pattern of aggression.
The technical glitches on the 4th, combined with the stress of the previous battle, created an environment ripe for misinterpretation.
It is believed that radar and sonar operators mistook their own propeller noise and high seas effects for incoming torpedo boats.
All I see are flashes in the water. Command.
Air support pilots, flying have reported confusion, but...
The critical decision was made. Trust the initial, alarmist report and act before the facts could complicate the military response. With Congress nearly unified, the power to escalate was centralized in the executive branch, overriding decades of careful checks and balances. The paper decree became the reality, a continuous, brutal commitment of U.S. forces to the jungles of Southeast Asia. As the war dragged on, public and congressional faith in the administration's initial narrative began to erode. The release of the Pentagon Papers years later confirmed that the August 4th incident had been knowingly misrepresented to gain support for escalation. The weight of the deception contributed directly to Johnson's decision not to seek re-election. The resolution was finally repealed in 1971, too late to stop the war, but a belated attempt to reclaim congressional authority. The war continued for 4 more grueling years, sustained by the legal framework established in August 1964. For the veterans and the Vietnamese people, the cost of that political expediency was immeasurable. The Gulf of Tonkin Incident stands as a perpetual cautionary tale. It underscores the fragile nature of democracy, when fact is abandoned in the service of political agenda.
A pretext that cost America